attitude is the opposite.
High fly ball, deep left field. Oh, 27 does it again.
Gone. Fernando Tatis Jr. with a 2-run shot has the Padres on the board. Ball and 2 strikes to Shohei here. Oh, got it!
33!
Oh, wow. Where did that one go? That's his 11th. Driven out to deep center field. Going back, Springer, turning, looking, see ya! Oh, what a shot by Judge! The Yankees lead 1-0.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 7th episode of our free baseball podcast. I'm joined today by my friend Jake Crumpler, fellow baseball nerd. We're gonna run down quickly the happenings with the hot stove. Major League Baseball's free agency has really kind of kicked into full swing. Most of the big names have now signed. So we're gonna mainly focus on that today. Talk about player fits and contracts and what we think of them. I'll go ahead and hand it over to Jake so he can get that started. The first big piece of news actually happened while we were recording our last episode. And it was the Mariners and Reds strike a major deal. The Mariners received Jesse Winker and third baseman Eugenio Suarez. The Reds got back for those two players, outfielder Jake Fraley, right-handed pitcher Justin Dunn, minor leaguer Brandon Williamson, which was the 2019 second rounder for the Mariners and their number 7 prospect, and a player to be named later. Talk a little bit about this deal, Jake. What do you think of it?
Yeah, it was pretty wild when that was happening on the stream. I was totally not prepared for that, especially it was like right when you like accidentally dropped out of the podcast. So I was just like, oh man, there's so much stuff going on right now. But yeah, that's a big one. The Mariners have a lot of like pitching prospects and stuff, and they've got some up right now. And obviously they signed Robbie Ray earlier this offseason. So they really needed to add to their offense. And outfield really wasn't like a place that they needed to add, but adding Winker is huge. Winker will probably end up DHing for them most likely, but he was insane last year. I had him on my home league fantasy team. He batted .305 with 24 homers and a 148 WRC plus. That came out to 3.2 Fangraphs WAR. And that was in just 110 games because he dealt with an injury. He's sort of a little bit injury prone. He always seems to deal with a little bit something, but his bat is legit. The projection systems have him sort of dropping off a little bit in Seattle next year, just because that park suppresses hitters so much, especially compared to Great American Ballpark where he was with the Reds. But he really upgrades that lineup huge, just a big lefty bat. And then the other player they got was Eugenio Suarez, who really struggled last year, especially for the first 5 months. He was also on my fantasy team last year. He batted 198 with 31 homers, and that came out to an 85 WRC plus. But there were some good signs at the end of the season. He batted 370 with 8 homers in September. So seemed like he started to turn it around. Not sure if he was like still recovering. I think he had some sort of hip or shoulder. He had some sort of injury that he got surgery for prior to 2020 or after 2020, sometime around then. So maybe he was still dealing with that and was finally figuring stuff out. But he's got huge power. He hit 49 homers in 2019, and that came after he hit 34 in 2018. So he could be really solid, especially if they can just keep him at third base after he had to play some shortstop last year at the beginning of the season, and that probably took his mind off hitting a little bit to have to focus on such a defensive-minded position when he really hadn't played that since he was first coming up. But the Reds' return is pretty interesting. Do you have any thoughts about like Fraley and Dunn or Williamson?
I know Dunn's a little bit more of like a post-type prospect. It's kind of come up and kind of had mixed results a little bit. Brandon Williamson, I think, is the really big get here for a Reds team that is selling basically anything that's nailed down. Like I said earlier, he's the number 7 prospect in a really deep Mariners farm system. And like we said before, with I'm drawing a blank at the prospect's name that they got back from the Twins, but they're looking. Chase Petty, that's right. But they're looking like really building a future rotation that could be really strong with Williamson, Petty, Green, and Lodolo. And I think I think the trade, obviously, for me, the clear winner is the Mariners.
For sure.
But their lineup competing in that division now, that's just gotten worse. Really, the Angels have added Syndergaard, and but their lineup is still kind of iffy outside of like Trout, Ohtani, Rendon, maybe a little bit. I know Walsh and Marsh. I know Marsh is projected to be a little bit better than he was last year.
Mm-hmm.
But the Astros obviously have lost out on another big name free agent and didn't really replace him, as we'll talk about later. It's a really big get for the Mariners, who really look set to try to break their what's going on forever now playoff drought.
Yeah, I think some of the pieces that the Reds got back could be pretty interesting, especially Jake Fraley. I know he's going to be 27 next year, but he's not a free agent until 2027, so they've got him for a long time. And he sort of got Winker vibes in that he can hit for some power, and that he walked 17% of the time last year, which is insane. Like when you're hitting double digits walk percentage, that's really, really good. 17%, that's like Juan Soto, Mike Trout, like they're at 20%. Like he's getting up there. That's pretty crazy. So putting him in a hitter's ballpark like Cincinnati could really pay dividends for them if they can just put him in the lineup every day to place Winker and stuff. But yeah, Dunn won't be a free agent until 2026, and he had a 3.75 ERA last year in 11 starts. He's got a pretty solid fastball, really good curve. And Williamson had a 3.38 ERA and a 1.18 WHIP in high A and double A last year. But the most important part, the most interesting part about him is that he had 14 strikeouts per 9 last year, which shows his ability. He's got 4+ pitches. He's sort of like a Blake Snell Jr. right now. Could definitely turn into a mid-rotation, top of the rotation type starter. But yeah, I do agree with you that Cincinnati Seattle won out on this one, and Cincinnati just seemed to want to get rid of Suarez's deal, which runs through 2025 or runs through 24 with a 25 club option. So we'll see how that ends up. Hopefully he can bounce back, but Seattle definitely improved their lineup in this one.
Yeah. I'm not counting out Justin Dunn in this trade. Looking at him a little bit further, he could be a lot better than what he's kind of gotten. He had a 3.75 ERA last year, but as in 50 innings, which was relatively limited sample size. Really high walks per 9 in his 3 seasons, which, like I said, is a low sample size. His first cup of coffee at 12.15 walks per 9, but that's in 6 innings, and then it's gone from a little over 6 to a little bit over 5 walks per 9, which is not very good. But it's obviously something that he could work on. And the Reds, for whatever reason, in the last few years have really shown an ability to work with pitchers that have struggled a little bit in their previous destinations, like a Sonny Gray and like a Trevor Bauer, and really kind of get them back on track. He could be a pretty big get for what seems to be kind of like a throw-in. It seems like Williamson and Fraley were really the ones that the Reds were after, and Dunn's kind of a throw-in. But I think he could be a pretty solid piece to a Reds roster that's not going to compete this year, but I mean, he'll get a chance to play in Cincinnati in a division that isn't the strongest hitter-wise. The Cubs aren't really going to compete. The Pirates aren't really going to compete. The only other team that's going to attempt to is the Cardinals, and they're not really there. And the Brewers are obviously probably for my sake, a little bit below championship contender level, but still a really good squad. So I like that situation for them. We'll move on to the next deal.
Speaking of the Brewers,
Andrew McCutchen, longtime Pirate, signed with the Brewers for 1 year, $8.75 million. What are your thoughts on Kutch going to the Brewers?
Yeah, that's really interesting, especially with the NLDH. He could get a lot of playing time out there in Milwaukee, but they have a lot of outfielders. It just seems like they sort of wanted contingency plans if guys get injured. Like Lorenzo Cain gets injured, seems like every year. Yelich has been dealing with back stuff. And they got Renfroe earlier in the offseason, but McCutchen gives them a strong bat from the right-handed side. He started off pretty slow last year, but he finished with a 222 average, 27 home runs, and a 107 WRC plus with Philadelphia last year. But you have to remember he's a 5-time All-Star, and he was the 2013 MVP. So he's got that ceiling. He's got really good plate discipline. I think he just lengthens a lineup that is out there just trying to support that big three of Woodruff and Burns and Peralta. at 35, maybe his ceiling isn't as high as it once was, but I think he's still a really good sneaky ad. And obviously he's a great clubhouse presence. I don't know who wouldn't like McCutchen. I'd love to have him on my favorite team. I did have him on my favorite team at one point, but yeah, the Brewers definitely got a good one there in McCutchen.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this for the Brewers. Like you said, I think he's most likely going to be their full-time DH. Renfroe's a pretty good fielder. Yelich not so much anymore, but I don't think they'd stick McCutchen in the outfield over him. Kane can still play a pretty decent center. But McCutchen, he struggled last year, but he still walked 14.1% of the time, which is really good. In a lineup that just gets even more protection now with guys that have broken out more like a Rowdy Tellez and like a Willy Adames, and hopefully with a bounce back from Christian Yelich, they can compete for a title. Their pitching is obviously excellent, probably the best rotation in the National League, not named, the San Francisco Giants or the Los Angeles Dodgers. They're just really, really strong pitching, great bullpen, and now they get a big boon to their lineup. I like this a lot for the Brewers. Moving on to our to Tuesday, March 15th. This all happened on Monday. The next day, obviously the Braves made the big trade for Matt Olsen. They signed him to a major extension, 8 years, $168 million plus a club option. What is your thoughts on this Olsen move? I know we talked a lot about Olsen and Freeman last week. Now that, like we'll mention in a little bit, one of those two is no longer in Atlanta. But I think this was a pretty good move for them. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think they sort of had to do this, or the move didn't really make much sense. Like, obviously getting Matt Olsen in replace of Freddie Freeman is basically the best you can do in that category as a first place replacement. But to then extend him for 8 years and only $168 million is huge, because obviously you're spending a lot more on Freeman, who's a few years older than Olsen too. And to have that club option at the end of it too for a 9th year, that's just really incredible that the Braves just continue to sign guys to below market extensions after the Albies and the Acuna deals. But yeah, that just he's one of the best first basemen in the league. He's going to be a free agent in 2030. Holy moly. It's going to be 2030. Holy moly. And then they'll have a club option on that 30 year, and it's only a $21 million AAV, which is really solid. He batted .271 with 39 homers and a 146 WRC plus with 5 WAR for Oakland last year. And like we talked about last podcast, amazing fielder, big power. And now he's going to be in an even better lineup in an even better park. He could really just get even better in Atlanta, in his hometown. But yeah, that's a great signing. It definitely all makes sense now why they would let Freeman go if they really thought that they had a chance of extending Olsen after trading for him. But you have to think they gave up like 4 pretty solid prospects and then are also paying for Olsen. So it comes out pretty even, I think. And then also you have to deal with like all the fans being upset that you lost a franchise icon, but great deal for the Braves. I wish Olsen had gotten a little more just for his sake. He's a really great first baseman, but yeah, that everything all makes sense now why they would forego Freddie Freeman if they thought this was possible.
Yeah, I completely agree. Olsen's one of the best first basemen in the league already. Really young, and now they have him locked up, like you said, until 2030, which is really good. And said it was 21, like a little bit of over 21 million AAV, which the Braves just somehow seem to end up stealing these guys consistently. I mean, Albies is on a steal of a contract. Olsen, you could argue now is, he could probably have gotten paid a little bit more. Yeah. Ronald Acuna Jr., the same thing. And the Braves still have a lot of room to add. And they did add. We'll talk about that in a couple seconds. But I like this deal for Atlanta. Obviously, it makes sense. You're not going to trade for this guy. I believe he had, 4 years of service time. So they'd have 1 more year of arbitration and then he'd hit free agency. So an 8-year extension they have him for what feels like forever. He's going to be really good for the Braves. As long as he plays to the same level that he's been playing in Oakland, which he's in an even more favorable situation now. Like you said, he's in a hitter's park and, in just a great lineup. Obviously they won the World Series. It's a really good move for Atlanta, even if it is coming at the cost of losing, one of your best players of the last 30 years, Freddie Freeman. The Braves did make one more move, and it's more of an understated one. I didn't see a lot of hype over this one, but I think this is really, really big for the Braves. They signed Colin McHugh for 2 years, $10 million, plus a club option. The club option is actually worth $6 million. So $10 million of his contract is, mostly divided into a club option. He was one of a few relievers last year that was actually worth over one FWAR. And with the Rays was just nails, one of the best relievers in their very good bullpen. That makes, this is an understated move that makes a potential repeat title, a repeat championship contender even better. I know you're really high on McHugh, and you picked him in your when we drafted from the free agents. Why don't I hand the floor over to you to talk about him?
Mm-hmm. Well, just to clarify, I'm pretty sure it's 2 years, 10 million, and then a third year club option.
Sure.
But yeah, nonetheless, McHugh's really good. I mean, he's going to be 35 next year, so he obviously doesn't have the same ceiling that he used to, but the Braves already had a really good bullpen with Minter and Smith and Matzik and all those guys, Luke Jackson, etc. But McHugh really gives them a swingman that could start a couple games. He started 7 games last year, pitched 64 innings, but amazingly at a 1.55 ERA with a 0.94 WHIP and a 30% K rate for Tampa Bay last year. So yeah, he really improves that bullpen and gives them sort of some length in the bullpen, some spot start ability, really just solidifies the whole staff. Like if you have a good swingman like that, who's really reliable, that can always just improve your chances of winning any game. Like if your starter comes out and you can put in McHugh out there in the 5th inning or the 6th inning, and get yourself a couple innings to get it into those last three couple innings to get to the closer. It's really huge, especially considering their signing that we're going to talk about later on in the podcast. They're really improving their bullpen, and that's a big key for players for teams that are trying to have success in the postseason. We've seen in the past with like the Indians, or the Indians back then, the Guardians now, when they were facing the Cubs, they had a really good bullpen. The Yankees have done particularly well in the playoffs sometimes with their incredible bullpen. But yeah, bullpens are huge, and the Rays have shown that most notably to having a good bullpen just makes you sort of unbeatable at some points. It just shortens games immediately. And McHugh just is really good. As long as he can keep what he had going last year into next year, he'll make the Braves bullpen really, really good.
Yeah. Even more adding on to that, his deal was 2 years plus a club option, but he's going to only get paid $4 million in 2022 and then in 2023. So it's actually a little bit less than $10 million. The $6 million club option does have a $1 million buyout, which if he just blows up the next 2 years and just doesn't really perform at the same level, there's really no harm. They can just get rid of him. He also is another homecoming. Matt Olsen is a hometown kid coming to Atlanta. Mm-hmm. Apparently Colin McHugh went to high school in the Atlanta area. So it's another homecoming, which is always cool to see, making that bullpen just that much better for title contender. Another move made by a potential title contender. Me and Jake maybe have some different opinions on that. Anthony Rizzo re-signed with the Yankees for 2 years, $32 million plus an opt-out in his deal. I'm a Cubs fan, so I have strong opinions about Anthony Rizzo. But this move was one that the Yankees needed to make, in my opinion, but one that I think fans will be kind of sour grapes on because he currently factors out to be the biggest move that they've made, apart from the trade that we talked about last week. What are your thoughts about this move?
Yeah, it sort of gives them a logjam around the infield, but Rizzo's really good. He had a sort of a down years the past couple of years, but I think he could bounce back big, especially in Yankee Stadium with that short right field porch. He could just knock out upwards of 30 home runs. But last year he only batted .248 with 22 homers and a 112 WRC plus. That was 1.6 FWAR. He's a really solid fielder. But yeah, like in the past, he's a 3-time All-Star, 4-time Gold Glove. He's a great person. I know of that. So I think what you said is right. They sort of needed to make an addition. I feel like I'd rather see it in the rotation, but Rizzo does add to that add to that lineup. He could bat towards the top of the lineup. He could lead off because he's got that really solid plate discipline, but giving them a lefty bat was sort of pretty key. And seeing him pull some balls down the line into those short porch could be pretty interesting next year. But I'm not sure it's a difference maker for them, especially because they're going to have to be competing with one of the powerhouses in the MLB now, the Blue Jays, and the Red Sox making a move that we'll talk about towards the end of the podcast.
Yeah. This move for the Yankees makes them better, but marginally. I don't think it's like a big, like over the moon signing, like Yankees fans were hoping to get a Trevor Story or a Carlos Correa, or make a move for Freddie Freeman or Matt Olsen. You'd see it everywhere on Twitter. Yankee fans going absolutely ballistic that their team didn't really make like a huge move. Rizzo's fine. I mean, he's a decent player. He's not on that expensive of a contract. He walks a ton. He's I think since he's entered the league, he's the leader in hit by pitch. So I mean, he's gonna get on base. And he gives a lefty bat to a lineup that kind of sorely needs one. And I think it's a good ad for them. It doesn't move the needle enough for me to really get them into like a position where I'd be comfortable saying like, oh yeah, they're going to be good next year. Like right now, they kind of factor out in my mind to be like the 4th place team in the AL East.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I don't really know what would change that for them, because now their moves that they could make to try to bolster their rotation, they don't really have any. All the really good starting pitchers are kind of gone off the market.
Yeah, there's nobody left
unless they make a trade or they really want to sign Johnny Cueto. I don't really see what the point of their free agency was. And if I was a Yankee fan, I'd be kind of upset about it. That they seem to be like completely okay to just stand pat. Like, oh yeah, whatever. We'll be fine with their roster that they barely scraped the postseason last year. Yeah. Another big move was made by a potential AL team trying to get into one of those last playoff spots. Brad Miller signed with the Texas Rangers for 2 years, $10 million. And that'll give them another super utility guy to add to their lineup. What are your thoughts about Brad Miller with the Rangers?
Yeah, he can be pretty underrated. They obviously had a hole at third base, especially after the IKF trade, because he was supposed to fill in for the injured Josh Young, who was one of their top prospects, but he got like a torn labrum, something like that. I don't know. He got some injury right before spring training and is going to be out for most of the year. So they definitely needed somebody to fill in at third base, especially after the IKF trade, like I said. And Miller can fill in pretty solidly. He's been like a utility guy for the Rays, and last year with the Phillies, he batted .227 with 20 dingers and a 105 WRC plus, and that was in just 377 plate appearances. So he's got 25 plus homer power. He definitely lengthens the lineup a little bit, gives them another veteran presence. But obviously they needed a third baseman, but I don't think the Rangers are going to be competitive without adding to their pitching more, like we were talking about last podcast.
Their ace is John Gray.
Yeah, exactly. John Gray, I think, could be pretty good, but they don't have anybody else behind him.
No. Yeah, that's it. That's it for our moves from Tuesday. Let's move on to Wednesday, March 16th. The big deal of the day was the Blue Jays and the Athletics make a trade. Matt Chapman goes back to the Blue Jays in exchange for Gunnar Hoagland, which is the 2021 first rounder and Toronto's number 4 prospect. Kevin Smith, who's a third baseman, shortstop kind of guy. He was their number 9 prospect, a little bit of an older prospect. Left-handed pitcher Zach Logue, who's their number 27, and a left-handed pitcher Kirby Snead. You're the Bay Area sports guy. I'll let you talk about your boy Matt Chapman, who will now be likely competing for a title with the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah, we talked about Chappie a couple podcasts ago when we were talking about bounce back hitters. It was him and Bellinger. So I'm a believer that Chapman can bounce back, and having him in a new environment in probably the best lineup in all of baseball really gives him a chance to bounce back even better. But yeah, it's really sad to see him go. He's probably the best defensive third baseman. I don't even think probably. He's definitely the best defensive third baseman in all of baseball right now. Only Arenado can lay claim to that because he's got the longevity there. But yeah, that's a huge get for the Blue Jays, no matter what they have to give up. I think Chapman's going to be a free agent in 24, so after 23. So they got him for 2 more years. But last year he batted .210 with 27 homers and a 101 WRC plus, but it still was 3.4 F4 because he was so good on defense. He's a one-time All-Star, but he's a 3-time Gold Glover and 2-time Platinum Glove, which says that was the best defender in the league twice. So that's a huge get, especially for a Blue Jays team that don't really have the best defense, especially on the infield. So that'll help their pitchers in Gausman and Barrios and all those other guys that we talked about last podcast after they added Kikuchi. But yeah, that's huge, especially if Chapman can bounce back. That lineup is just going to be insane. And watch out, because he could just be winning MVP. Last time the A's traded a star third baseman on the rise to the Blue Jays, it was Josh Donaldson, and he won MVP the very next year. So that's huge. But on the minor league side for the A's side, Hoagland could be pretty good. He was pitched in NCAA last year, 2.87 ERA in 11 games started in college. And Kevin Smith could be really good. He had a down year in I think it was 19 because they didn't have a minor league season in 20. But last year he came back strong. Had 285 with 21 homers and 18 steals and an 11% walk rate, which is really solid. Came out to a 144 WRC plus, and that was all at AAA. So that's pretty impressive, especially for a guy that may have had his prospect star fallen a little bit, but he had a little 18-game MLB debut last year, which not much to write home about, but he seems like the ideal ace player with that plate discipline, can play probably left or third base, shortstop, and second base. I'd guess if you can play shortstop, you can probably play second base. So that's pretty good. And he could be up this year. So he could be making a difference at some point this year. But the rest of the guys maybe aren't too big of difference makers. Zach Logue will be 26 next year. And he had a 3.67 ERA and a 1.11 whip with a 10.4 K per 9 last year in AA and AAA. And Kirby Snead is going to be 27 next year, but he was really good. He's more of a relief pitcher prospect. 2.35 ERA and a 1.17 whip with a 36% strikeout rate for the Blue Jays in their minor league system in AAA last year. And he had a 7-game MLB debut and had a pretty solid ERA as well. So he could be pretty interesting, especially if the A's have a plan for them. But yeah, I think the biggest get there is Hoagland, who not sure about his stuff because he didn't pitch in the minor leagues last year. Probably was just working at the complex and stuff for the Blue Jays. But yeah, Kevin Smith could be really interesting, and we could see really soon if he's a big part of the A's going forward.
Yeah, I like this trade. Like we said with the other one, I like this trade a lot more for the Blue Jays. The Athletics have obviously kind of sold off anything that's got a lot of value outside of like Ramon Laureano. My big issue with this trade and a couple of these trades are now that their farm system has gotten a lot more talent in it. Mm-hmm. Some near the top end, but a lot of their guys that they've gotten are like older. They picked up Shea Langoliers and Pache 24 and 23, and both of them kind of figured to be like quadruple A players right now. Pache couldn't really hit last year. Obviously a great fielder and center, but where are you going to put Laureano unless you trade him? Mm-hmm. Hoagland didn't really pitch much last year. He's also on the bounce back from a Tommy John surgery. He could be really good, but he's gone from number 4 prospect in the Jays system to he's now the number 7 prospect, right behind JT Ginn, who they acquired in the Chris Bassett trade, which I just think they could have done better in this trade. Kevin Smith's their number 15 prospect, and he'll probably be up this year, but he's 25, and he seems to be like more of like a glove first kind of like infielder who'll obviously hit for a little bit of power. He's got good plate discipline, but like I don't know. I think this trade factors out so much better for the Jays instead of the Athletics, that it's just tough to see like what the plan is. Like, obviously you want to get as much talent as you can possibly get. I just think they could have done better.
Yeah. I mean, if you remember the Josh Donaldson trade, like the highlight was Brett Lowry. And if nobody knows who that is, that says everything about how that trade went. They also got really Franklin Barreto, I think, and he never panned out. So yeah, nobody panned out from that deal. Let's hope it's a little different as an A's fan. I hope everything goes better and that Hoagland actually is a real deal sort of thing, and Kevin Smith can do some stuff. But yeah, Matt Chapman is a star and is going to make the Blue Jays probably the best team in baseball, in my opinion.
Right. The next big move, a couple more big moves happened on the 16th.
Huge moves.
NPB star Seiya Suzuki signed with Chicago Cubs for 5 years, $85 million. It was originally reported as like $70 million, but it's $85 million plus the posting fee, which was $14.65 million. He's going to give the Cubs a face, hopefully, to their rebuild if he pans out. I know they were in on Correa for a while, or at least reported to be. But Seiya Suzuki, I mean, he tore it up in NPB, just unreal. Last year, walked when he struck out. He hit 30 home runs for 140 WRC plus, 386 on base. He was worth 4 WAR. We've talked about it before, and how kind of struggling to see how this really fits a Cubs timeline. But I'm actually going to be on the opposite end of that, and I think obviously I'm a Cubs fan, but I'll talk about it a little bit. Seeing as Suzuki is 27, and a lot of their prospects figure to be up around 2024. So they'll have him for a year or two. Maybe a couple prospects hit ahead of schedule. Brennan Davis, Pete Crow Armstrong, Braylon Marquez, he has reliever downside, but Jordan Wicks, a lot of their guys, they're expecting to be up relatively soon. And I guess that's the plan. I don't know if it's going to work. It doesn't seem like the most foolproof one, but I guess that fits their timeline if they're not planning on this being a long rebuild. What are your thoughts on him signing with the Cubs?
Yeah, I think it's definitely important that we know his age, that he's going to be 27 next year, like you said, because it seems like you're saying, it seems like a weird timeline to trade off all the stars from the 16 World Series and then to go immediately back into free agency and sign Stroman and Suzuki and stuff. Like, are they going to be competitive this year? Like, obviously I don't care if the owner spends a lot of money. I want all the owners to be spending money. It's just like, are they going to be competitive in an NL Central with like we talked about, the Brewers and the Cardinals? But so it'll be interesting to see. I personally love Seiya Suzuki though, so I was really sad to not see him go to my Giants, who I predicted him to go to, because he's incredible. Like you were saying, he had 38 home runs last year with a 317 average, 1,069 OPS, and he's been one of the biggest stars in the NPB. He was a 5-time Gold Glover and a 5-time All-Star, and that was just like he only played through his age 26 season. So he's a big star, got really good plate discipline, pretty good speed. And I think he could be a really big difference maker for the Cubs. He's obviously going to be the biggest star in that lineup, but I mean, he's got Frank Schwindel on his team.
That's true. I like this signing personally from a fan perspective, because it's another big name to get to watch for my team. It's just trying to see where he fits in to the overall plan towards contention. Like you said, I mean, you want all the owners to spend. There's no reason for them not to. I just, it, in a way I see it, and in a way I don't. A lot of their top guys are supposed to come up. Brennan Davis is their number 1 prospect, and he's looking pretty good so far in spring training, but he's a AAA player projected to come up this year on MLB.com, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. A lot of their guys are like 2024 to 2025 guys. Yeah. And that, to me, that makes a little bit of sense, because you could have had, if they had signed someone like a Carlos Correa, because a lot of their top prospects are like shortstops. They could have got Carlos Correa and Suzuki, and that would have made sense. But just getting the one, I don't really see it. I mean, if they'd gotten Correa, you could have slotted him in at short. And then later on, when you have someone like a Christian Hernandez come up, you can slide him to third. Seiya Suzuki, I mean, he's going to play in the corner, and he's going to hit home runs probably for a team that's going to win like 75 games.
Yeah. And if you have those guys coming up in 24 and 25 and stuff, that doesn't mean that they're going to be good right when they come up. That just means like they could still be 3 or 4 years away from like being legitimately good major leaguers. And Suzuki will be off the team by then. Right.
I think that the signing is nice to see the Cubs actually spending a little bit of money.
Definitely.
But I don't get the timeline. Another big name slugger that plays in the corner outfield is Kyle Schwarber. He signed for the Philadelphia Phillies to play along Bryce Harper, and another big name we'll talk about in a little bit. It's 4 years, $79 million. We had some thoughts about this. Obviously, Kyle Schwarber is going to hit you a ton of home runs. Citizens Bank Park is a huge hitter's park. He's going to be a lot of lineup protection for Real Muto and for Bryce Harper. And that lineup, for me, it looks so good. And then you factor in, we've talked about it so much, how bad their defense is going to be.
So bad.
And Kyle Schwarber doesn't make it any better. He'll hit home runs, but this might honestly be the worst fielding team like in the last 10 or 15 years in all of baseball. It's going to be like, hopefully not for Phillies fans' sakes, but I think it's going to be like a circus. What are your thoughts about this, Steele?
Yeah, I totally agree on your points about the defense. They were already like a pretty bad defensive team, and to add Schwarber and the other guy we'll talk about later in the outfield, it's just they're gonna have to definitely make a move for some guy to be a defensive specialist on the bench, because Schwarber doesn't provide a lot of defense, and the pitchers are really going to struggle from that. But on the positive side, Schwarber was incredible last year. I think he had his best season last year, and it was in just 113 games. He hit 32 home runs with a 145 WRC plus and 3 WAR with Washington and Boston. The majority of those home runs, half of them came in a 21 game span in June, which is insane. He hit 16 home runs in 21 games. I think he's one of just a few players ever to do that. So he's obviously got big power. If he can carry that over to Philadelphia, where they have a really good park factor for left-handed hitters, like we've seen with Bryce last year as he won MVP, they're going to be really solid. I predicted Schwarber to go to the Phillies because I saw that they needed another solid left-handed bat to pair with Harper, because they really don't have anybody else that bats from that side. But Schwarber is just going to make that lineup super dangerous. As long as they can just catch a few of the balls in the outfield, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a lot of like 10-9 games, similar with the Rangers, where the Rangers might have better defense, but they got much less pitching than the Phillies. So I don't know. The Phillies have struggled to even reach 500 for the last few years. So I don't know. I feel like the people underestimate the Phillies gonna Philly aspect of the Phillies, where it's like their bullpen always seems to fall apart. Their defense is horrible. Like they always like seem to fall apart towards the end of the season. But maybe with these additions to the lineup that make them just maybe the best lineup, or one of the best lineups in the National League, they can counteract all the horrible defense and the effect it's going to have on their pitchers and their bullpen falling apart like it usually does. But let's hope that the Phillies can turn it around. But with the division that they're in is really good. Like the Mets have added a lot this offseason. The Nationals obviously added Cruz, and they might not be super competitive, but and the Braves, obviously, can't forget the Braves, 2021 World Series champions. So they've got a lot of competition there, but the defense is going to be a big factor. We were talking about right before we hopped on live to the podcast was Kevin Kiermeier would be a really solid add if they traded for him from the Rays, because he's one of the best defensive outfielders in all of baseball, and the Rays are obviously trying to sell him off before he's a free agent, and obviously he's getting paid a lot right now, so that would seem like a perfect fit, especially because they don't really have anybody of note in center field right now. So either that, or they're going to need 4 bench spots of just guys that are going to come in late in the game to fill in for these defensively limited outfielders and infielders.
Right. We talked about it a little bit before the show, and there's actually there were some rumors swirling that the Rays want to trade Austin Meadows, and that the Phillies were actually really interested in Austin Meadows. And yikes. Oh my God, if you want to talk about like terrible outfield defense, I mean that would be like all timer.
Oh yeah.
And we made it a point, to talk about. I listed it out. They made a deal also. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but they signed Nicholas Castellanos, who, if you've watched Nicholas Castellanos play in the outfield, it's like a train wreck. He's a great hitter, obviously. I really like Castellanos. Great hitter. He's a good guy. He just can't field. He's just not very good. And if they were to put together an outfield that was going to try to jam Austin Meadows in it, as well as having Castellanos somewhere, the minimum they would have if they were going to play Harper, it would be Meadows has a -16 DRS for his career. Kyle Schwarber is -13. Castellanos is -48. That is abysmal. Bryce Harper is a solid defender, but he's aging, and he's not aging very well as a fielder. He has a 9 career defensive runs saved. That's not good. If they were to try to trade for Kevin Kiermeier would alleviate a lot of the defensive woes that Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper have. He's a 122 career DRS in center for the Rays, which is a very weird ballpark. He's a very, very good center fielder defensively. Obviously not a very good hitter, but in that lineup, it's so strong he wouldn't need to. as much as he would on like a Rays, where they don't really have many great bats outside of like the top of their order, and it's just a bunch of kind of like glue guys that keep it together. If they were going to trade for a Rays outfielder, I think it would have to be Kevin Kiermeier and not Austin Meadows for Phillies fans' sake.
Maybe
and
get
Phillies
both.
pitchers' sake. Maybe get both. I don't know how on earth you could try to get that to work with that weird lineup unless they want to put like Castellanos or something in like third. I would love to see that.
Put him at short for Didi.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on. There's a bit of an understated move made by the Detroit Tigers. They signed Andrew Chafin last year with the Oakland Athletics and the Chicago Cubs for 2 years, $13 million plus an opt-out. I think this is a really big move for the Detroit Tigers bullpen. Like we said earlier, with Colin McHugh, he was one of a handful of relievers that actually posted one or more FWAR as a relief pitcher in 2021. Probably the best lefty pitcher reliever on the market, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on this move for the Tigers, who look set to try to compete in what's shaping up to be a relatively competitive AL Central?
Yeah, I definitely think the Tigers could be on the rise this year, especially if Torkelson and Riley Green get called up relatively early. But to add to a bullpen for a team like this that has a bunch of young starters, added Eduardo Rodriguez to the rotation, and they've got an improving lineup to add a really solid bullpen piece to the duo of Fulmer and Gregory Soto at the end of the bullpen will be really, really solid. Last year, Chafin threw 68 innings in 71 games, and that came with a 1.83 ERA and a 0.93 WHIP, just a 24% strikeout rate, which is pretty average. But that was with Chicago and Oakland last year. I think he definitely gives them a lot of depth in the bullpen. He's probably not going to be as good as he was last year. He's going to be 32 next year, but definitely a really solid, underrated addition. They have that opt-out, or he's got an opt-out at some point in that deal, but I think he's going to be an under the radar difference maker. Like, you normally don't think of like setup guys as difference makers, but he could be pretty interesting, especially if he keeps up the pace he had last year. Just a really solid under the radar addition that probably won't be talked about a lot, but he is going to be making a difference under the radar. Like I said 3 times.
Yeah. I really like Andrew Chafin. Getting to watch him pitch actually last year was one of the only bright sides of being able to watch the Cubs for a lot of it. He looks like he has a lot of fun when he plays. If you've seen the obvious shirts, he was rocking the failed starter shirt every day. Big mustache, wild hair.
He's a fun guy.
The nickname, the Sheriff. I mean, he's a fun guy to watch that you want to root for. He's just nails last year. Obviously, he posted a 1.83 ERA. 2.98 FIP, just really strong. And he did it off the back of mainly just getting ground balls. He got soft contact all year. No one really ever hit him hard. He's just gonna, and especially in a ballpark like Detroit, that's a cavern. That's where fly balls go to die. So when they actually hit him hard, he'll probably be even better in Detroit. I really like this move for the Tigers. And I really like seeing teams like this actively try to compete. They've already signed, Javier Baez, and they've been in on a couple other big free agents. I don't think they're quite there, but with Torkelson and Riley Green coming up, hopefully this year, they could be in the mix for a playoff spot. And if not, I mean, Andrew Chafin, if they really want to, someone will pay top dollar for a reliever like that at the deadline, especially if they still have control, and on a relatively affordable contract. If they really just nothing goes right, I think this is a no risk, tons of reward move for the Tigers. We'll move on to another big move, kind of akin to the Kyle Schwarber move, being made by an NL East team. Eddie Rosario, NLCS MVP, re-signed with the Atlanta Braves for 2 years, $18 million plus a club option, making this lineup even better. Obviously adding and Matt Olsen and subtracting Freddie Freeman, but Eddie Rosario had a really good postseason with the Braves, and hopefully he can continue it. What are your thoughts on this move?
Rosario is a pretty interesting move. Gives them a lot of depth in the outfield, especially with Acuna out for a little bit at the beginning of the season with his ACL injury. But last year he batted .259, 14 home runs, 11 steals. That came out to a below average 98 WRC plus. That was in just 111 games. He started off really slow with Minnesota. I'm sure it probably had something to do with the Twins not being competitive early on. But as soon as he got to Atlanta, he picked it right back up to the pace that he was at in the previous couple of years in 19 and 18 with the Twins. And he ended up, like you were saying, having a really great postseason, winning NLCS MVP. I thought that might give him maybe too big of a deal and might hype him up a little bit, but he came out to a pretty solid deal. They've got a club option for him on a third year, but yeah, he's only going to be 30. I think it definitely lengthens the lineup. I'm trying to think of who else they have in the outfield. Obviously they have, can't even think of anybody. Oh, Duvall and I guess Acuna would play center, but yeah, I think they definitely needed to add somebody with Acuna out right now and having lost Pache and those guys. But he definitely gives them another look from the left side. I'm not sure he's going to be as good as he was maybe in 2019. I think he hit like 36 home runs or something. Obviously, that was the juiced ball era, but just a pretty solid signing. Like not every signing has to be an absolute superstar that's going to like push you up to the top of the division. Sometimes you really just want those role players that are going to come in and just be solid day in and day out, fill in for guys all over the outfield, and just play every single day and that kind of stuff. And I think Eddie Rosario fits that fits that plan pretty perfectly.
Yeah, important. He started last year with Cleveland, and didn't really.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, then didn't really do much of anything, and then got traded. He actually effectively got traded for nothing. The Braves traded Pablo Sandoval for him, who the then Indians, now Guardians, released, and the Braves re-signed. So Eddie Rosario effectively got traded for nothing, wins NLCS MVP, and now gets to continue with the Braves. And it's important to remember the Braves should get Marcell Ozuna back this year. And an outfield potentially of Duvall as your fourth outfielder, Ronald Acuna Jr., Eddie Rosario, and Marcell Ozuna is really, really dangerous in this lineup. I like Eddie Rosario. He didn't have the best season, but obviously, I mean, we know what he can do. He's got big power from the left side. He just doesn't strike out a lot. He just absolutely refuses to walk. That's the only real downside to him, is he's just one of the weird players in Major League Baseball that they're going to swing at everything, and he just will not walk. But I like this move. I mean, he was relatively cheap signing him. Relatively cheap signing. At worst, he's a fourth outfielder, and I think this is pretty good for the Braves. A relatively minor move, a little bit of a pun intended. The Royals and Reds made a swap. The Royals trade Mike Minor and $1 million in cash considerations for Reds reliever, known hothead and fireballer Amir Garrett. What do you think of this move?
This move made absolutely no sense to me.
I agree.
Why would the Reds go and trade Sonny Gray, who was earning about the same as Mike Minor, and then go ahead and get Mike Minor from the Royals while getting rid of Amir Garrett, who could be really solid, especially like you're selling Amir Garrett at his absolute lowest value. Like he had a 6.04 ERA and a 1.57 whip last year. He had a 28% strikeout rate, which is solid. We've seen him over 30% before, but he can be a really good reliever. He just obviously had some struggles last year, but why would you trade a guy at his lowest value and then also be getting a guy back who's going to be making $9 million next year, and is going to be 34? It really just doesn't make much sense to me at all. Just keep Sonny Gray and keep Amir Garrett. Like, why? Like, I don't get this. Obviously, you get Chase Petty back, but if you're going to do that, then why trade for Mike Minor? That part just makes absolutely no sense to me. Maybe they were having some disagreements with Amir Garrett towards arbitration and that kind of stuff, but I don't know. Maybe they thought he was making them look bad by being hot-headed, like you were saying. But it makes no sense to me. Mike Minor had a 5 ERA last year. He was worth 2.3 F4 because he threw 160 innings almost. But that doesn't make much sense to me at all. Yeah,
me either. I kind of saw this move and I kind of had to double take it in my phone a little bit. Like, what is this trade? I don't really get it. And I get it slightly more for the Royals. I mean, their bullpen not very good.
Oh yeah, it makes complete sense for the Royals.
It makes more sense for the Royals. They don't really have any great relievers, like Scott Barlow and Gabe Spire, Josh Stalmont, who throws 100, and that's kind of it. But it's a good move for the Royals, who now they have a bounce back candidate reliever who could be really good. If he is really good, great, they've got him. Maybe they can sell him on at the deadline, what have you. It makes absolutely zero sense for the Cincinnati Reds, who just made a couple head scratcher moves. We talked about their trades, getting rid of Winker and Eugenio Suarez. It's just I don't know. It's been a weird offseason so far for the Cincinnati Reds. But the Royals got some more good news. They actually signed franchise icon Zach Greinke, 1-year deal worth $13 million plus incentives. I think this is a really, really cool move. Obviously nostalgic seeing Greinke back in KC, but I think it makes a lot of sense as a baseball standpoint for them as well. What do you think?
Yeah, they have a really young rotation. They've got a lot of pitching prospects, which is not a bad thing to have, but you definitely need a veteran to stabilize that. I think their oldest starter was going to be
I think it's Brad Keller.
Yeah. Couldn't remember his name for a sec. Got it. Brad Keller was going to be the oldest starter. So adding somebody like Greinke, who I know this is going to be a common refrain around people discussing this move, to have him be like a mentor for those young pitchers. Greinke doesn't seem like a guy who's going to be a mentor. He's a sort of like introverted guy.
Watch and learn.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to be like, I'm not going to tell you anything, but you can learn a thing from watching me. But he's a really introverted guy. Like, I don't know if he's going to be like going out of his way to like teach a bunch of young guys how to pitch. But I think even if he's not that good next year, just having that presence around is really good. He's going to eat some innings. But last year he sort of took a step back. Like, he's been really, really solid for his whole career. I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer once everything is said and done. But last year he had a 4.16 ERA and a 1.17 WHIP. The biggest thing that fell off was his strikeout rate. He literally just stopped striking guys out. He used to be like a north of 25% guy, and last year he was down to 17%, just a little bit over that. So I'm not sure he's going to be getting that back. That sort of makes him a little bit unappealing from a fantasy perspective, where when you're getting starters, you obviously want that strikeout upside. But if anybody's going to bounce back, it's going to be Greinke. He's going to be 38 years old next year, but he is one of the most cerebral pitchers I think out there. He gets by command and keeping hitters off balance and that kind of stuff. So maybe he can the young starters out there can learn a thing or two about mixing up your pitches, mixing up your speeds, moving the ball around the zone and that kind of stuff. But no guarantee that he's going to be the ace that he was when he won the Cy Young Award with them back in 2009.
Right. And I think this is just a good move from all around from the Royals perspective. You sign a guy like this that's obviously won a Cy Young with your team. That's going to draw fans to your ballpark, even if they're not going to be necessarily competitive, but that will get fans in the door who will then hopefully keep coming and watch your next breed of stars come and play. They have, obviously, I think he's the number one prospect in all of baseball, Bobby Witt Jr. Another top guy, Nick Prado. Both could be up this year. I know Nick Prado is currently projected on MLB's website to be up this year, but they have a lot of really good young pitchers in the pipeline that he could help, even if it's not necessarily by a here's how you do this kind of way. And maybe Zach Greinke's not as introverted around teammates as he used to be. Maybe he will take on a mentor role, but even if he doesn't, I mean, just watching a guy like that and getting experience from being around a guy like that is invaluable. Yeah, the osmosis effect. Being around a guy like that for Chris Bubich and Brady Singer, who are their two top guys, and Daniel Lynch. They could really have something here. Just a cool move. You like a little bit of sentimentality with your baseball. At least I do. Let's move on to a little bit of a move that I didn't think made any sense. I'm pretty sure you feel exactly the same. Chris Bryant signed with the Colorado Rockies for 7 years, $182 million, with a full no trade clause in his contract. I saw this move, and I think like basically every baseball fan that is not a fan of the Colorado Rockies, and probably even some Rockies fans are like, why is this the move that the Rockies are making? Why is Kris Bryant actively choosing to do this?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Rockies don't be making much sense at all anymore. They obviously just got rid of Nolan Arenado, their former star third baseman, just prior to last season. And that was after signing him to a similarly lucrative extension with a no trade clause. So Kris Bryant could be out of town in just 2 years. But on a more serious side, Bryant's really good. Maybe not as good as the 7 years, 182 he got, but it seems as though the Rockies were in a bidding war against themselves. Like I don't know who else was in on Bryant, especially all of the moves we saw prior. It seemed like the Rockies were just like, oh, please, Kris, please sign with us. Like we need a reason for people to come to our ballpark. Why did they let Story go? Why did they trade Arenado just to sign Bryant back? Like I have no idea what they're doing. They're obviously not going to be competitive in a division that features the Dodgers and the Giants and the Padres. So I don't know. The only, I think, silver lining from this is that Kris Bryant is just going to be a monster in Colorado. He's got pretty solid power. He's more been like a 25 homer, 265 guy in recent years, but I think going over to Colorado, you could see him getting up to like 290, 285 with 30 plus home runs. He could be like a real difference maker, especially in fantasy where you don't really need to care about his defensive value or worry about his BABIP and his park adjusted metrics and stuff. But he's probably going to end up playing left field, especially with them having Ryan McMahon at third, who we'll talk about towards the very end of the podcast. But head scratching move from a Rockies perspective. Great job by Kris Bryant's agent to get him this big deal. And hopefully he enjoys his time out there. I went to a Rockies game last year, and that park's pretty fun. Denver's a really nice city. So hopefully he enjoys his time out there. It's obviously close to Las Vegas, where he grew up. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully they can build around him. I really, really doubt it.
Yeah, I actually saw a couple of interesting factors that went into this. One, I think, is geographic destination. He's close to his hometown's obviously Las Vegas, same as Bryce Harper's, but I think that could have factored into it. Obviously the money, I mean, they're paying him well over the odds, I think, for Kris Bryant. And also I saw Fuzzy on YouTube, who's an MLB The Show content creator, raised the question, do you think that Kris Bryant is signing with the Rockies and in a very obvious hitter's environment to be a star to try to bolster his potential Hall of Fame case? And I don't necessarily think so, but I think it could be a side effect of what he's doing. But we've seen this with Nolan Arenado already. You sign your guy to a huge contract and you say, okay, well, here's our star. Here's who we're going to build around, even though I just don't really see that with Kris Bryant. He's more like a really, really high level glue guy. It's just, I don't get it for either side. After you see Arenado get disillusioned and after you see Trevor Story, like, okay, I really don't want to re-sign here. Why would you, other than the money, obviously, why would you actively choose to play for probably the worst run organization in professional or in American professional sports? Yeah. I just don't really get this move. Good for Kris Bryant for getting his money. Scott Boras is obviously, a genius agent that's going to get any of his guys paid well over the odds somehow. I don't know what he does. He must have dirt on every GM in the league, but
blackmailing everybody.
He must, but
bro, it's probably so easy to find dirt on Dick Monfort.
I bet it is. I don't know. This was a weird move. Good for Kris Bryant. I don't know. Rockies fans ought to be not too happy. Sorry, Gus. I could see your comment. I just don't really see any upside here. Let's talk about a player signing with your San Francisco Giants, Jock Peterson. Atlanta's bad bitch in the playoffs signs with the San Francisco Giants. Bringing the Pearls to San Fran in the Bay.
Oh yeah.
What are your thoughts about this move?
Yeah, I'm sort of glad he was on a couple teams in between his Dodgers stint, or it would have been a little bittersweet seeing him come over to the Giants from the Dodgers. But now that he's gone to other teams, I've grown to appreciate him a little bit more. He obviously played with the Cubs last year before winning the World Series with the Braves. He's a 2-time World Series champion. Last year he batted .238 with 18 homers, just a 94 WRC plus, but it was only 481 plate appearances. He gives the Giants another lefty bat, which was sort of confusing to me. They've got a lot of lefties. So not really sure why they needed to add another lefty, but it seemed like as soon as Seiya Suzuki went, so it seemed like they were pursuing Suzuki, and then as soon as he signed with the Cubs, they were like, okay, we need to get somebody else. And so Jock will Jock will probably play DH. The comment below, I support the Rockies for their $1 hot dogs. No offense taken.
That's a good enough reason.
Oh yeah. But yeah, I think Peterson will factor into that DH role. He's probably going to be a platoon. The Giants love platooning. And he sort of fits perfectly into a platoon role. With whoever they'll have batting righty. It seems like it'll be like him and like Wilmer Flores or something. But yeah, he could be really solid. Obviously he's a fun clubhouse presence. It's going to be fun to watch him. Especially it'll be interesting since he was like a really top prospect when he was coming up with the Dodgers, that I think he could take another step forward that we haven't really seen from him, because the Giants are known for getting the most out of all of their players. So we'll see if the Giants can do something like that. I'm excited to see Jock on the team. I know his young, I think it's his younger brother, but his brother Champa got a locker in the clubhouse too. So that's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, super. But yeah, it'll be fun to have Jock around smashing some dingers into the Bay.
Yeah, I like this move for the Giants. I mean, they're a big proponent of platooning. And it's just a really, really good move under the radar. Really, if he doesn't pan out, it's a 1-year deal. There's no harm done. Obviously he has experience hitting in the NL West, which is another big upside. I mean, he's been kind of up and down throughout his career, high strikeout guy. Hits for a lot of power against right-handed pitching. I think this is a good move for San Fran. I don't really see any downside here. We'll talk about the other NL West move, a little bit bigger than Jock Peterson.
Maybe just a little.
Maybe a little bit. Freddie Freeman signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers for 6 years, $162 million.
Boom.
Making probably the Dodgers the very clear World Series favorite. Just an unbelievable lineup, full of stars, especially now with the DH. They can move Max Muncy to play DH.
Mm-hmm.
This move was just insane. What are your thoughts being a rival fan of the Los Angeles Dodgers? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I shed a couple tears for the Giants NL West champion hopes. God, the Dodgers just keep on adding to a team that doesn't need anybody else. They're so good, and they just keep on adding former MVPs, like multiple time All-Stars. Like they recently added Mookie Betts a couple years ago, and then added Trey Turner and Scherzer. Obviously, Scherzer's now with the Mets, but they retained Trey Turner for this year. They lost Seager, and they were like, well, I guess we got to replace him. Yeah, and so they went out and got Freddie Freeman, who's been probably the most consistently amazing hitter in all of baseball besides Mike Trout. He's one of 2 qualified players to have a 130 WRC plus 130 WRC plus or better every single year since 2013. So just him and Mike Trout in that category. So that obviously shows just how amazing he is. Last year he batted 300, 31 homers, 135 WRC plus for a 4.5 WAR with the Braves and helped them win a World Series. He was the 2020 MVP in the National League. He's a 5-time All-Star. He's just absolutely amazing. He is also like a great guy. Like he always seems like he's having a lot of fun. He seems like he loves baseball. It's really, really, really too bad to see him go to the Dodgers. It's just another player that I'm going to have to root against. And I'm going to not like enjoy having him on the Dodgers and stuff. Like I really liked Mookie Betts before he went to the Dodgers. I really liked Trey Turner before he went to the Dodgers. I really liked Albert Pujols before he went to the Dodgers. And now they just they're just ruining so many great, like, enjoyable players for me. I'm sure that's not the case for you, as you're not a Giants fan. But he is absolutely amazing. That lineup is just so dangerous. If everybody stays healthy, it's just going to be, how are you going to beat that team when it gets to the playoffs?
Right. This move it's so off the wall. We all kind of expected Freeman to go once Olsen signed.
Yeah.
I think we were still holding out for a little bit of hope he'd stay in Atlanta, just as like from a mutual fan, or from the words escaping me. But just from an outside looking in, seeing Freddie Freeman sign with the Dodgers now, like I said, I mean, they look so much like the NL favorites, at least out of the NL. Their pitching's great. Their lineup's incredible. I don't really understand how any team other than the Jays even really comes close, and I don't even think that's all that close. They have the best lineup in baseball. For me, they're the World Series favorite based on this move, and they were probably a World Series favorite before, and they're still a World Series favorite now.
Exactly.
It's a really good move that they could have made. I don't think the contract is all that bad. I mean, he's 32, 162. 162 million for a 32-year-old, but he's been a perennial all-star, probably future Hall of Famer. Really, really good move from the Dodgers.
Yeah, they're like the Yankees of the early 2000s and late 90s, but of the National League and of the West Coast. Just adding just all the biggest stars, even when you already feel like they can't possibly get any better. They just go and add a freaking MVP.
Yeah. Your Giants tried to counter that with the move on Thursday. We actually talked about this, talking about who are the top pitchers left at the time, and you actually said if any team was smart, they would go out and get the man who signed with your San Francisco Giants. That is Matt Boyd. He signed for 1 year, $5.2 million plus incentives. What are your thoughts on this move? Matt Boyd's kind of been up and down. A lot of people have had him pegged as like a huge breakout guy. For several years, and it seems like he hasn't really put it together, but I think the Giants are a great landing spot for him. They've turned veteran pitchers around like no other team has. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree. He really does have a lot of potential. I don't know why the Tigers didn't trade him after 2019 when so many teams were interested in his services, and then he sort of struggled a bit with injuries and ineffectiveness the last couple of years. Last year he pitched 78 innings, came out to a 3.89 ERA and a 1.27 WHIP, but he just had only a 19% strikeout rate. So there was something going on, because in 2019 he had a 30% strikeout rate, so he was like a big strikeout guy, and then now he's like closer to what Zach Greinke was doing last year. So it's like sort of confusing, but if anybody's going to get the best out of him, it's going to be the San Francisco Giants. He's really solid from the left-hand side. He's going to be 31 next year. I don't think he's going to be able to start the season on time. I think he's dealing with some sort of injury, but when he does enter the Giants rotation at some point next year, which there's not much room right now, but if he does get an opportunity in the rotation next year, they could turn him into somebody that's really, really valuable. Just like big strikeout numbers, especially with the ballpark suppression that the Oracle Park has. He could be a really sneaky addition. He's obviously not going to be like an ace, but like considering what the Giants have done recently with like Gaussman and Wood and DeSclafani and all those guys, like he could be really, really good depending on if he comes back healthy and if he gets a spot in the rotation. Yeah,
I completely agree. And you can make a case that his numbers from the last year actually look relatively similar to Gaussman's numbers right when he joined the Giants. His ERA was even a little bit better. I think there's honestly no other destination that would have been better for Matt Boyd than the Giants. I mean, the Giants are a pitcher's park. They're just, I don't know. I like this move a lot. I think with him and the Jock Peterson move, it's just two like very quiet upgrades that make them theoretically, if they pan out, just a lot better. And that's really what the Giants have been about the last few years, of making quiet upgrades and turning guys around that really, really show out and compete for them. I think this is a good move. I mean, he's on a 1-year deal, $5 million. That's basically nothing. Basically nothing in Major League Baseball now. I think he represents so much upside for them. If he pans out, I mean, that rotation is very good with Disco and with Logan Webb. It's just I don't know. I like this move. Giants and Zaidi have really made some really solid under the radar moves.
Yeah, don't forget Rodon.
That's true. I forgot about Rodon.
Yep,
completely forgot about him.
They've been making a ton of moves this offseason, and nobody seems to be talking about him. And the Giants are going to get the best out of anybody they sign. So watch out, Dodgers.
Yeah. A couple more under the radar moves that we will talk about is Corey Dickerson signed with the Cardinals for 1 year, $5 million plus incentives. And I think this is another really good under the radar move for a Cardinals team that's really trying to get back into the postseason. We've both had them pegged in our way too early predictions for the season that they will not make it back. But Corey Dickerson has been an under the radar player for basically his entire career. Yeah. And I think this move makes them a pretty good amount better. What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, they have a full outfield with O'Neill and Bader and Dylan Carlson in right field. But I think Dickerson will factor into the DH role, probably will end up platooning in a similar fashion as we were talking about with Jock Peterson. Last year, he batted .271, just 6 homers, came out to a perfectly league average 100 WRC plus. And that was in just 365 plate appearances with the Marlins and the Blue Jays last year. But yeah, I mean, the Cardinals are one of those organizations that just seem to just keep guys really solid. Like they come out with a lot of stars, but when they make those under the radar signings, they always seem to be just like pretty solid, So we'll see how much of a difference maker he's going to be. I don't think he's like the biggest signing or anything. Obviously, he only signed for $5 million, but just to have that depth when you've got big prospects coming up on the way, like Gorman and Juan Yepes and those guys that will probably end up factoring into the DH role somehow, to have a veteran that can just stave them off for a little bit, just to see if he can produce like he has in the past. He's got really solid contact ability. He's got a little bit of power, but definitely gives the Cardinals a little bit more depth.
Yeah, I think he's a really good pickup as a fourth outfielder. He obviously worked mostly in a platoon last year with the Marlins, and later on with the Blue Jays. I think this was a pretty solid move for a team that, like your San Francisco Giants, continuously get the best out of players. The Cardinals always have a little bit of double magic to them. I don't know what it is. It just every random role player for them will have one big moment or one hot stretch that will propel them into relevance or into a wild card chase. Like last year, they rode a super hot streak and made the playoffs. I think this was a really solid under the radar move for what could shape up to be, one of the top young outfields in baseball. If O'Neill is to replicate what he did last year, Carlson pans out and Bader continues to hit a little bit. I like this move. I don't see any downside to it. It's always good to have depth with your team. And that's exactly what the Chicago Cubs did when they signed Jonathan Villar to a 1 year, $4.5 million contract with mixed in there with a couple mutual options and incentives. This move came basically midday on Thursday and effectively signaled the end of the Cubs chasing Carlos Correa. But I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Jonathan Villar is a really valuable player. He's obviously no Carlos Correa, but he's a valuable player. Hits for a little bit of power, gets on base. He can play basically every infield position apart from I don't think he's played a lot of first, play outfield positions. He's just a super utility guy for a team that really needed a player like that. I know Nico Horner was kind of slated to be the utility infielder. He's played basically every infield position apart from first base consistently. And Villar will likely press any of these guys for their spot and fit in almost in like a Ben Zobrist role a couple years ago. What are your thoughts on this move?
Yeah, just a one of those depth signings that we were just talking about with the last few guys. He batted 250 last year, 18 homers, 14 steals. He's one of just like 10 players, I think, who's had double-digit homers and double-digit steals for the last like 5 years, not including 2020. He was worth 2 WAR last year with the Mets. So just he's just like a really solid under the radar guy. He's not like a huge fielder or anything. Doesn't have like the most dangerous bat, but just the fact that he can add speed to your team like that with a little bit of power is going to be really solid for a team that could be either having like a little bit of underperforming from like a lot of young guys or guys that are dealing with injuries. Like you've got a lot of question marks on that Cubs team, especially around the infield. So I think it's really interesting, solid signing.
Right. Nico Horner's dealt with a couple injuries. Patrick Wisdom's obviously a guy that you hope can get you a little bit of production like he did last year. I mean, he hit a bunch of home runs, but he hit like 233 and he strikes out over 40% of the time. Nick Madrigal's working his way back from an injury. They have Andrelton Simmons, who's not really a very consistent bat. Frank Schwindel is Frank Schwindel. He's the best player in baseball. But I like this move. I mean, he's a depth signing, super utility guy. These are guys, too, that if the Cubs are not in contention, he's on a 1-year deal. He'll likely be traded at the deadline for something. Maybe not anything major, but something. Decent little move. We'll stick with a former Cub. Ryan Tepera signed with the Los Angeles Angels for 2 years, $14 million, and hopefully helping fix the Los Angeles Angels' terrible pitching woes the last few years. What are your thoughts about Ryan Tepera?
Yeah, the Angels have just been making a ton of just additions to the to the pitching staff recently. I think the only offensive player they signed was Matt Duffy, but to get Tepera and a bunch of other relievers and starters that they've gotten so far this offseason is really, really smart, considering that really the only shortcoming of their team is their pitching. So to throw him into the bullpen with to back up Raisel Iglesias is really smart. He had a 30% K rate last year, an under 0.9 whip, and a 2.79 ERA last year in 61 innings with the Cubs and the White Sox. He's a big Chicago guy last year. But yeah, the Angels just can use anybody as long as Tepera can stay healthy. That's just going to be amazing for an Angels club that just seems to always be in need of more and more and more pitching.
Right. It's another MVP vote getter also to add to their collection with Ohtani, Trout, and Rendon. Tepera, like we said last year, I mean, he was really valuable last year for both Chicago clubs. He had a 2.73 FIP and a 2.79 ERA, so worth 1.6 WAR. He strikes guys out. Almost an 11 Ks per 9, and that's desperately what the Angels need. They just need relievers and any pitching they can remotely get, because it has just been the complete shortcoming of that team, apart from Mike Trout getting hurt, that has really kept them out of the playoffs. I like this move for the Angels. It's just another good move that the team really needed to make, because they're so hard up for pitching.
Exactly.
We'll move on to another reliever signing, and it's back to the Chicago side. Michael Gibbons signed with the Chicago Cubs for 1 year, $3.5 million plus a mutual option and incentives. He's bounced around a lot in the last couple of years, but he's been pretty valuable. And a few of his stops, hit or miss. But he'll probably factor into a closer role in Chicago. What do you think about Gibbons?
Yeah, he's been pretty underrated for the last couple of years, especially because he was pitching in Colorado before he got traded to the Reds last year. So it's pretty impressive that he was able to put up an ERA below 3.5 last year. His WHIP was really high, 1.37. But he's got a solid 25% strikeout rate. He's not like, he doesn't really have like anything stand out, but to have a veteran reliever, which the Cubs sort of really need, with like Rowan Wick being their top guy and Cody Hoyer out with Tommy John surgery, Gibbons definitely gives them some stability in the back end of that bullpen. So yeah, he'll definitely factor into the closer role. I don't think he's going to be like anything to write home about. I don't think any Cubs fan is going to be talking about how amazing Michael Gibbons is next year, but he's going to be really solid, I think.
Yeah, it's just another guy that they'll probably have in the bullpen and flip at the deadline, because they're not going to be contending, which those guys are always good to have. A couple other pitcher signings, more minor guys. Garrett Richards signed with the Rangers for 1 year, $4.5 million plus a club option, and Danny Duffy signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers for 1 year, $3 million plus a club option and incentives. Those are two probably swing guys, can start can be in the bullpen. Those guys are valuable. They always will be. We've said it a couple times on several other shows. I like both of these moves for both teams. I mean, Garrett Richards kind of struggled a lot last year. So has Danny Duffy in the last few, but I don't think there's any downside to either of these. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't have much to say about those. Richards has dealt with a lot of injuries, same with Duffy, but they're both guys that could factor into the bullpen, factor into the rotation. Will just lengthen bullpens that sort of could use some help, I guess. I don't know if the Dodgers really need any more help, but Duffy showed increased velo last year. But yeah, other than that, they're just both going to have to stay healthy throughout the year if they're going to want to have an impact on their clubs.
Right. We'll move on to the moves from Friday, March 18th. The first one was the San Diego Padres and the New York Yankees making a trade. The Padres received first baseman from the Yankees, Luke Voit, and the Yankees coming back and got minor leaguer Justin Lang, who's a 2020 first rounder and San Diego's number 8 prospect. This started off the week too with Aaron Boone saying, "Oh, who's our first baseman? Luke Voit." And now it's obviously Anthony Rizzo. Before that, who's our catcher? Gary Sanchez. Who's our third baseman? Gio Urshela. They're all gone. Yankees haven't really gotten any better, and the Padres have a lot to gain from this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Luke Voit was turning into the Miguel Andujar to the Miguel Andujar, Clint Frazier, just like we're going to trade them for an all-star or something.
Esteban
like Luke Voigt's
Florial.
going to be, Luke Voigt's going to be 31 next year. So it's all about staying healthy for him. Last year, he batted just 239 with 11 homers, but that was a 111 WRC plus. It was just 241 plate appearances, but we've seen his ceiling. In 2020, he was the home run champion, crushed 22 homers, which was a 59 home run pace in a shortened season like that, 153 WRC plus. He's probably going to be the everyday DH for the Padres, so maybe that'll help him stay healthy, but I think adding any sort of offense to that Padres lineup, they were sort of lacking, especially after Fernando Tatis went down. That Padres lineup was looking pretty weak. So adding Voit is really strong. I don't think there's much to write home about with Lang. He had almost a 7 ERA last year, but he was pitching in complex league. Like that's below rookie ball. He's got a long way to go. He's only 20.
Right. I know the Padres and had spoken a little bit about Luke Voit potentially platooning with Eric Hosmer. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think he'll most likely be their everyday DH. I think they did miss out on Nicholas Castellanos, who we'll talk about in a little bit. But Voigt's not the worst consolation prize. I mean, he's got big power. We've seen it before. If he stays healthy, and that seems to be a lot of what goes on with the Padres, especially last year and now this year with Tatis staying healthy. Health is the big key for them. They really need to stay healthy if they're going to do anything, especially in an NL West that has only gotten better. I like this move for the Padres. I hate this move for the Yankees. I don't think it makes any sense. You could fit Voit in somewhere if you absolutely had to, or you could have gotten more from him from somewhere else. Like you said with Lang, I mean, he hasn't really looked like much of anything, and he was the number 8 prospect in a Padres system that outside of their top 2 with Gore and Abrams, I mean, I think with Hassel too, there's not really anyone there to write home about. Like their top 4 of like Abrams, Campusano, Hassel, and Gore untouchable, and everyone else seems to be kind of like, whatever. They've traded them for every name they could possibly find. So I don't know. This move for the Yankees was a head scratcher, but good for the Padres. I mean, they've gotten better off of them.
Yep.
We'll stay in the NL West. Tyler Anderson signed with the Dodgers for 1 year, $8 million plus incentives. Probably one of the last really good starters with a lot of upside left on the market, and the Dodgers get him. So what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I don't know about him having a lot of upside. He's more of just like a low strikeouts, like he's going to eat some innings and stuff, but the Dodgers really need that, especially with like Kersh in the rotation and a couple other guys that aren't too like durable and that kind of stuff. So it's really important for them to get a guy that can eat innings. So I don't think he's going to be like super amazing. He's not going to be shutting anybody out, but he's just going to be really reliable innings eater throughout the year. Last year he had 2 WAR in 167 innings pitched. So that'll be pretty solid. Obviously hope he doesn't do too great on the Dodgers, but he's not going to be anybody's like Cy Young candidate next year, but he will be making a bit of a difference with his inning eating ability.
Well, the Dodgers tend to turn guys around too. So knowing your luck, they'll probably turn him into a Cy Young candidate. I think this move is pretty solid too. I mean, you said with a few more injury-prone guys in their rotation, like a Kershaw, he'll eat innings and really take some of the burden off. If he absolutely has to, they can flex him to the bullpen, I'm sure, and just have more options as a swing man. along with Danny Duffy.
Yeah.
And I think this is another low risk, middling reward move for the Dodgers. But I mean, they're one of the best teams in baseball, if not the best team in baseball right now. And it's a move that makes them marginally better, if anything. We'll move on to one of the best starters on the market left at this time. Was Michael Pineda, and he signed with the Detroit Tigers for 1 year, $5.5 million plus incentives. And the Tigers have had a pretty sneaky good. I wouldn't even call it sneaky good. They've just had a really good offseason. Chafin, Baez, Pineda, they've gotten better. And Pineda has pitched before in the AL Central with the Twins. Obviously with the Twins for the last couple of years. 2 middling results. He's been a lot better in the last couple of years. I think this was a good move for Detroit. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't have much to say about that one. He's in the same vein as Anderson, where like he's just going to be like pretty solid and eat some innings if he can stay healthy. Tigers sort of need that with their young staff, but he'll help Eduardo eat those innings.
Yeah, just a good move all around for Detroit. Another good pitching move from the day was the top closer left on the market, Kenley Janssen, former top closer in the league. Kenley Janssen signing with the Atlanta Braves to play with his countryman from Curacao, Ozzie Albies. This is a really interesting move for the Braves, and one that makes their bullpen a lot better if he can even return to some of the form that he's had in the past. I mean, he's been on the downturn, but he's still good. I mean, he's still a valuable reliever. I think this was a really, really solid move that the Braves made. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it.
Cool. I think Kenley was not one of my favorite players, obviously being the star closer for the Dodgers for quite some time. We saw the Braves manager, or maybe it was Anthopoulos, the GM, say that Kenley was going to take over at closer for Will Smith, which doesn't make much sense, but I guess it does considering Kenley's track record. But he has really like started to fall off, especially from a velocity standpoint. But last year he sort of had a really good bounce back, so I think he can be really a real big difference maker, especially in a pen that we've already talked about, added Colin McHugh and already was really solid last year. So they're just going to have so many options in the end game there, especially if Kenley doesn't end up being super good. They've still got Will Smith to come back him up and be the closer as soon as he starts to fall apart. But if Kenley is what Kenley's been, which is a nearly Hall of Fame closer for his career so far, he could be making a huge difference. Last year he had 38 saves, a 2.22 ERA, and a 104 WHIP with a 30% strikeout rate, and that's really solid. He's a 3-time All-Star, 2-time reliever of the year. I think the Braves are just looking like the favorites of the NL East, even though the NL East is just really, really competitive with the Mets having that huge offseason that they've had so far.
Yeah, I like this move, especially. I know you talked about not making much sense of putting him in a closer role, but he has more experience closing than probably any other reliever on their staff. Will Smith has been up and down. Seeing Braves fans on Twitter being really unhappy with Will Smith, and he had 6 blown saves and he had 7 losses last year. He led the league in games finished, but he only had 37 saves. He finished 60 games. Kenley Janssen, I think, should represent a little bit more stability there at closer. A little bit less of a roller coaster ride with Will Smith. I mean, he has been super up and down with the Braves. Hasn't really been, what we all thought he was going to be. And he had a good campaign last year, but nothing like hopefully what Kenley can give them. I think this is a good move for the Braves. It's on a 1 year. So, I mean, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You've seen teams in the past kind of get burned picking up older closers like this or older relievers and expecting them to really replicate something. I know the Cubs got really bad off signing Brandon Morrow to a 3-year deal. And he basically
forgot about that. Holy moly.
He basically started out okay and then blew up and never pitched again. And you're stuck with that contract for 3 years where he just eats a ton of salary. Kenley Janssen on a 1 year for 16 isn't that bad, considering that they probably saved a lot of money not re-signing Freddie Freeman and instead extending Matt Olsen. The Braves have made a lot of really good value moves that have made their team so much better. I think they have to be, for me, one of the biggest winners of the offseason, just making several moves that have really made them just a lot better. We'll move on to the 2 other huge moves from the day. and that were Nick Castellanos signing with the Phillies for 5 years, $100 million, and to join Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper to potentially make the worst fielding outfield of all time. And that will hit 9 million home runs.
Yeah.
I love this move for the Phillies, though. It makes so much sense. Bryce Harper desperately needs lineup protection in a lineup that was horrible, and they've made their outfield a lot better. Even if they don't necessarily get someone to replace like Odubel Herrera in center, but they started out with a projected outfield this offseason. Bryce Harper, Matt Vierling, and Adam Hazley, and Schwarber and Castellanos. Even if Castellanos is the full-time DH, represents so much of an upgrade on the offense of those two that it's hard to not call this a win. I think this was a great move for the Phillies. And, you know, I had in our top remaining free agents prediction article, I actually had Castellanos predicted to go to the Phillies. You know, the universal DH is here. Now that they've signed Schwarber, Schwarber's is a better defender than Castellanos, so they can hide him in left. Castellanos will be the full-time DH, I'd have to imagine. And, I mean, he's going to hit tons of home runs in Citizens Bank Park. What are your thoughts about this move for the Phillies before we move on to the last huge blockbuster of the day and continue?
Yeah, I definitely would not have pegged Castellanos for the Phillies after they signed Schwarber, because like we've been saying already throughout this podcast, the Phillies just are going to have one of the worst defenses of all time. So it didn't really make much sense for them to add another defensively limited outfielder. But yeah, it might not matter with how good this offense is going to be with Castellanos and Schwarber in there, and NL MVP Bryce Harper. You got Hoskins in there, Gene Segura, Alec Boehm if he bounces back. Like, they could be just such a dangerous lineup. So it might not really matter. But yeah, the defense is really so questionable. Like we said, poor Aaron Nola. He's just going to struggle once again. One of those guys that like severely underperformed his ERA estimators, and that is usually a cause of bad defense behind you. And so that seems to be the case again here. But Castellanos he needs to be in a good hitter's park, and Citizens Bank is a good hitter's park, and he's going to be in a super deep lineup. So yeah, if I got pitchers going up against the Phillies, I would cover my eyes and maybe turn the sound off and just pray.
Well, I think their plan outside of like Nola and Wheeler is to just win every game like 15-14.
Exactly.
And that'll be good enough. I think the moves that the Phillies have made to bolster their lineup this offseason so far, I mean, they can still make more moves, has been really good. Schwarber and Castellanos getting probably just the two biggest outside of Nelson Cruz pure sluggers that were available, was just a great bit of business for them to protect Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper is, for my money, I mean, he's the MVP last year, desperately needs to get back to the point where they'll contend with him. I can't imagine he'd be too happy spending the rest of his career on a team that's basically going to be third or fourth place in the NL East. So it's a good move for the Phillies there. We'll move to the huge blockbuster that caught all of us by surprise. In the late hours, Friday night, Carlos Correa, the top prize on free agent in all of free agency, the number one free agent, signed with the Minnesota Twins for a 3-year contract worth $105.3 million with opt-outs and a full no trade clause. The 105.3 is very important because that brings it out to an AAV of 35.1, which would give him the largest single AAV contract in history, which he was obviously after.
The 0.3 on the 105.
Yeah. I think this move for me makes minimal sense, but that's okay. And I'll explain my thoughts on that. Why after I hear yours, Jake.
I actually think it makes a lot of sense. Considering what the Twins have done so far this offseason, their moves wouldn't have made sense without this move, because they traded for IKF by trading away Mitch Garver. Then they replaced Garver with Sanchez at catcher, but that required them sending away IKF and opening up a hole at shortstop. They obviously got Urshela to replace the departed Josh Donaldson, who also went to the Yankees. But it was like, why are you trading Josh Donaldson and freeing up all this cash unless you're going to be making a large move? And obviously a lot of people were probably thinking, oh, the Twins are going to get Trevor Story. Like, why would Correa want to go to Minnesota, like such a small market like that? But now we see why, because they were offering him just a massive deal that they were able to sign because they freed up that money from getting rid of Donaldson, and this makes their lineup like really good. They already had like a pretty solid lineup, but to add Correa in there, that's really good. He gets a lot of his value from defense. He was a 5.8 F4 player with only a 134 WRC plus. 134 WRC plus isn't only he's like a really solid hitter, but he's not like a superstar hitter like Bryce Harper, those guys who are over 150 WRC plus is that kind of stuff. But his defense is some of the best at shortstop, and I think the only thing that doesn't make sense here for the Twins is that their pitching is just not that great. Like I know a lot of people were talking about when this trade went down that night, are the Twins playoff contenders now? And I think if you looked at their lineup, you'd say, oh yeah, for sure. They're definitely playoff contenders. But then you take a look at their rotation, and it's headlined by Sonny Gray. And then right after that is like Dylan Bundy, Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober. Joe Ryan and Bailey Ober could be solid, but we've only seen them for a small samples period of time last year. And Dylan Bundy has struggled every year except for 2020. So they've got a ton of question marks in the rotation, but this move definitely makes them a lot better and makes the Twins seem like they're serious. Like you would never consider the Twins to be big spenders in the offseason, but to go out and spend 35.1 annually is huge, especially with the opt-outs after the first couple of years. This is pretty interesting for Correa. He can hit the market again whenever he wants to. The Twins, it's a partial no trade clause. I don't know if it goes into effect after this year or something, or if he can only choose certain teams that he can't be traded to. But I'm pretty sure the Twins, like if they're out of contention, would be able to trade him this year before he opts out, if he's doing really well and they're not in contention. But yeah, super interesting move for a team that's trying to be competitive. Would love to see them get like Frankie Montas or Sean Manaea, something like that, just to make that rotation seem a little bit more legitimate, not have to rely on the super young guys that broke out last year. But I think it was a really smart move, and definitely makes more sense with the context of their previous moves in the offseason.
Right. I think this move would make a lot more sense if they did make more moves to acquire some pitching. Their bullpen's been kind of middling with like Stashak. They've lost Trevor May. They have Tyler Rogers and like Cody Stashak. Their bullpen, other than that, is kind of a little shaky. But I mean, now they have the first overall pick, and I'm not exactly sure which draft, but it was number 1 and 2 were Correa and Buxton. So they have a number 1 and a number 2 pick from the same draft.
Wasn't Royce Lewis a number 1 pick too?
Yes.
So that's 3.
But Correa and Buxton were number 1 and number 2 in the same
draft.
in
the same draft. Oh, yeah. Dope.
Right.
That's crazy.
I think this move makes a lot more sense if they do acquire some pitching. Like you said, with Montas or Manaea, or if they had been able to re-sign Pineda, or made some move, like getting a Matt Boyd or something to make this make a little bit more sense. The AL Central, in my mind, doesn't really figure to be the most competitive divisions. The White Sox look still pretty clear, top dogs in the division. The Guardians are probably around a 500 team. The Royals are rebuilding, and the Tigers could be competitive, but they're still a really young team. The Twins look like they're trying to get the most out of what they have left from their major rebuild with like Buxton, Sano, Jorge Polanco, Nat Core. But I like seeing the move because it's a team trying to be competitive. I just don't think they will be very competitive. They could maybe sneak into like a wild card spot as like, and almost in my mind, like a best case scenario. If they get some pitching, sure, I think they could actually really challenge the White Sox maybe at the top of the division. But until that happens, I'm not sure. But I still love this move because it's a small market team trying to make the most of what they have. You see teams like the Cincinnati Reds just blow it up. Like they were in the Oakland Athletics. These are teams who were in the playoffs 2 years ago. And now they're throwing in the towel. We're out. No more contention for us. It's going to be several more years before we try. And that's frustrating from a baseball fan, from a neutral fan perspective. So seeing the Twins go out and actually make moves like this and picking up, Gary Sanchez, Carlos Correa, Gio Urshela, it's nice and it's refreshing to see a team actually go out and spend to try to be good. I'm not quite sure that this move gets them there, but like you said, it's a 3-year deal. He's got opt-outs. If he wants to hit the market again, he can. Also, in the middle of the season, they could trade him and get an absolute haul back for him if they're out of contention. This is a really good move for them. I just would really like to see the Twins fully complete their roster and go out and get some pitching to try to push them over the edge instead of, kind of sitting on the fence of, okay, well, we're going to stay and pat a little bit, but we're going to compete with our lineup. I would like to see that to really push me over the edge. So like being sold on them as an actual playoff team. Moving on to a couple minor moves on Saturday, one minor move and then one bigger move. Drew Smyly signed with Chicago Cubs for 1 year, $4.25 million, with a mutual option and incentives. Drew Smyly spent bits and pieces of, I believe it was 2018 and 2019 with the Chicago Cubs when he was trying to recover from Tommy John surgery, never pitched an inning for them and was eventually DFA'd, let go. Now figures to probably be an innings eater in a pitching rotation full of innings eaters outside of like Marcus Stroman. But, I think this move is pretty solid. He's flexed from the bullpen to a starter, back to the bullpen, back to a starter, obviously won a World Series. I think this is a minimal risk move for the Cubs, just like a lot of moves that they've made. Not a whole lot to talk about here. Do you have any thoughts?
No, I totally agree. There's not much to say. I don't think he's going to be a super big addition. I know one of my other friends that's a Cubs fan was saying that he liked the move, but I don't really see much here. He's either going to struggle to stay healthy or he's going to pitch to like a mid-4s ERA, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The only time we've seen him be really good was 2020 with the Giants, and we know why, because they're just amazing with veteran starters. So unless he can get the velo back he had in that shortened season, I don't think he's going to be a huge difference maker.
Right. And his fastball ticked all the way down almost 2 miles an hour. And it's, I don't know. The move's a so-so move. I don't think this really pushes him over the edge. Like, oh, we got Drew Smyly, but he's a decent player. Now going to another former Brave, World Series champion and World Series MVP, Jorge Soler signed with the Miami Marlins for 3 years, $36 million plus opt-outs. I think this is a really good move for the Marlins, who were pegged all offseason to be after a big bat like a Schwarber, like a Castellanos, and they get a gigantic one with Jorge Soler. He kind of struggled during the regular season, but man, did he really turn it on in the playoffs and especially the World Series. Now 2-time World Series champ, cashing in. Well, he'll go hopefully hit a bunch of home runs for a young lineup. What are your thoughts about this move?
He's a big bat that they really needed to add to their team, because the Marlins have a really, really good young rotation headlined by Sandy Alcantara. They got a bunch of guys on the way in the minors. They've got a couple guys that are already up that still have more upside to reach, but Soler will definitely give them some power in their lineup that they needed. They're relying on a couple they were relying on a lot of young guys and maybe some guys that are more defensive minded, like Miguel Rojas. Like, they're obviously relying on like Jazz Chisholm and Jesus Sanchez. And they signed Avisail Garcia earlier in the offseason. So they obviously wanted to add to that outfield. And I think Soler, even if he ends up playing DH, will be a solid addition. They really just need anything they can get to scrape a couple of runs across the board, and that will really they're not going to be in contention, but next year, if they with their guys coming up in the minors and guys like Jazz and Jesus Sanchez, like I said before, progressing, I think next year they could be really good. And Soler will factor into that. He's there for 3 years. I don't know when he gets to opt out. It seems like he's got a couple of them, but he will definitely make that lineup a little better as it is right now. Will help them going forward, adding a lot of power, and they really need that. Like I said, they just need to scratch off just a couple of runs. Like they're like the Giants from the early 2010s, where they have really good pitching and a sort of really mediocre offense, and all they really need to do is just scratch across 4 runs and they'll be able to win a game. But we'll see. We'll see if Soler is that big difference maker and gets them there this year. But I think it's going to be more of like a 2023 sort of difference making move.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Like you said, they have help on the way, but most of their top prospects that would come up, apart from like JJ Bleday, who's kind of taken a step back in his development from what a lot of people thought. A lot of their top prospects that are ready in a few years are all pitchers. Edward Cabrera, Max Meyer, Sixto Sanchez.
Exactly.
They have Jesus Luzardo and Sandy Alcantara, who are both young, great pitchers. Luzardo still has a bit to figure out compared to Alcantara, who's really good.
Mm-hmm.
They need to make some moves, and they needed to make something happen to try to make their lineup better. And Avisail Garcia is another really good signing along with Soler. I think Soler will probably be their DH
for sure.
Aguilar.
Don't forget that Soler hit freaking 48 home runs in 2019, so he's got huge power.
Right, and he struggled last year and just really never put it together until the playoffs.
But World Series MVP.
Right, but he still hit 27 home runs in a down year, which is a lot. I mean, he's had seasons where he's really shown, and everyone knows that he's got power, and that's literally his nickname is Soler Power, Georgie Sunshine. Once he figures it out to actually be able to hit for power and not be dead useless at everything else when he's hitting, he'll have a ton of value with a team like this. And a lineup that desperately needs help, like you said. A lot of guys have taken steps back to, like Brian Anderson at one point really looked like he would be like their next really solid third baseman. And he's got a great glove. He just hasn't really continued that with the bat. He had like a 99 WRC plus last year, just pretty average. Jazz has a lot of potential. They have like Aguilar and guys like Garrett Cooper and stuff that'll hit home runs. But like you said, I mean, it's a lineup that kind of like you hope can scratch a couple runs and hope their pitching can take them far. They need guys that can hit a 2-run home run with ducks on the pond that'll be able to do that. And Jorge Soler is that guy. We have one more major free agent signing to talk about, and then we'll talk about an extension. Yesterday, the big news was that the best free agent on the board at the time, Trevor Story, signed with the Boston Red Sox, breaking Yankees fans' hearts everywhere. 6 years, $140 million plus an opt-out, club options in there. This move was just really good for the Red Sox. We talked about it a bit in the group chat. I had a couple questions about it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts before I delve into mine.
Yeah, I think Story is a really good player. He's obviously not going to be as amazing as he was in Colorado, but everybody always points to just road numbers, but you have to consider the Coors factor. Just like being in that mile high air is gonna have an effect on you when you leave and you go to a normal elevation and stuff. It's going to have an effect on you. The pitches are going to move differently, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, everybody's going to struggle on the road when they're literally going from like playing in space to playing at sea level and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's a big deal. I think he should definitely play shortstop. He's not going to play shortstop this year. They said he's going to go to second base while Bogaerts plays shortstop, but Bogaerts is a free agent, I think, after this next season. So he will probably leave in free agency, and that will allow them to move Story to short. Really good contingency plan if they can't end up signing him back, but definitely makes their lineup really dangerous. Last year was a really down year for him, and I'm sure it had a lot to do with Arenado leaving town and the Rockies just looking just completely hopeless throughout the season. He only had 24 homers and 20 steals, which is really good, but that was a 100 WRC plus playing in Coors. But from 2018 to 2019, which was his peak, he was batting he averaged 293 average with 36 home runs and 25 steals and a 125 WRC plus and 5.5 WAR on average across those 2 years. So yeah, he's a star guy. He's a star player. He's got a big bat. And I think playing in Boston and New York and Camden and the Blue Jay Stadium, Rogers Center could really offset the fact that he's leaving the best hitters park and going into another division that has a lot of really solid hitters parks. And I think he's going to be really big. The Red Sox really needed to make a move considering everything that the Blue Jays and even the Yankees, and I don't think the Rays made any big moves, but considering everything that the rest of the division has done, the Red Sox really needed to make a move to keep up. And they did just that by getting the top remaining free agent.
Right. And I think this move, like you said, it makes a little bit of sense with Bogaerts' timeline as well. Trevor Story's contract has an opt-out in 2025. The club can void that if they exercise his option, which is in 2028, which is a little weird. But Bogaerts is going to be a free agent in a couple years. I don't understand why Trevor Story isn't going to play shortstop this year. I think you need to try to make a compromise there or something. Move Bogarts to second. I think the only issue that could possibly be here is Trevor Story also struggled last year and potentially could be playing second this year due to an elbow injury. And there was some speculation that it's really hindering him throwing the ball. So if he doesn't have to throw it, across the diamond from short, and he can just throw it from second to first base, more power to him. This is a really good move for the Red Sox, who, like you said, needed to make one. They've only really subtracted so far. They lost Eduardo Rodriguez, and their lineup just hasn't gotten much better. And there's another lineup last year that I think performed a little bit over expectations, but could this year, if they get a little bit more production out of Trevor Story, should bounce back. If Bobby Dalbec can do anything, if Verdugo can hit a little bit better too. I mean, this is a team that will probably be the second best team in a division. If they can beat out the Rays, I think the Rays are their number one competitor right now. I think the Jays are just a mile above everyone else in that division right now. Because they've made the most moves. This is a really, really strong move for Boston. And I really like this. Initially I was like, why would they do that? Why would they do that and just cram him at second? But it does block Jeter Downs a little bit, but he hasn't really developed like they thought he was going to either. I think this is a really strong move to make themselves better in the division, and they should get a little bit more help too. I mean, hopefully this year, if Bobby Dalbec doesn't figure it out, you'd have to think we'll keep Devers at third. They'll keep Bogarts if they can re-sign him too in the future. At short, Story can play second, and then Tristan Casas, who's basically their top hitting prospect, would come up and play first, and that'd be a huge boon to them as well. I like this move for the Red Sox. I just think it's a really, really good one. They just need a little bit more to push the Jays to the top of the division, and I don't know where they're going to find it from now until the start of the season. There's one more major move from free agency, but not really a free agent signing. The Rockies have extended Ryan McMahon for 6 years, $70 million, plus a couple opt-outs mixed in there. McMahon really took a step up this last year, and it was handsomely rewarded with an extension to join future Colorado Rockies legend Chris Bryant in their lineup for years to come. What are your thoughts on this move for the Rockies?
I like McMahon. I think he could even take a step forward, build off of last season's 254 average and 23 home runs. It was only a 95 WRC plus because obviously he's playing in Coors, but he was one of their top prospects coming up. I think he could definitely take another step forward, which I think the Rockies are betting on, considering the extension that they just signed him to, and considering the opt-outs. The opt-outs are really weird. He would be a free agent in 2028 from this deal, but the opt-outs, he has a 2026 opt-out if he finishes in a top 5 MVP in either 2022, 2023, or 2024. And then if not, then he has an opt-out in 2027. And it's an 11.7 AAV across the deal. So pretty interesting to keep a guy around like that. You obviously want to keep your homegrown players around if you're any fan of a team, but like we've been talking about, it seems like every podcast, no idea what the Rockies are doing. Haven't seen a lot. Like, we haven't seen a ton from McMahon. So to give the benefit of the doubt to the Rockies that they see something in him going forward is probably not a good idea. Like, you don't really want to be like, oh, the Rockies probably know what they're doing. Like, they gave it to him for a reason. No, it was probably they're just like, we want to keep this guy around, like, so that he doesn't, so he doesn't pull a Trevor Story on us, But yeah, I don't know. I like McMahon. I think he's a cool player. He's nobody really talks about him a lot, but he'll be pretty solid, especially in fantasy, where it's like I've said before, like, you don't have to worry about park factor stats like eating into his average and home run and stuff. But he'll be more than serviceable for a Rockies team that is going to be out of contention early.
Right, and it's important to mention that he's one of their top guys coming up. And one of their best homegrown players. They just signed him to this 6-year extension. He's 27. So, I mean, he's going to hit free agency when he's 33 now from the Rockies, which I believe would be in 2028. I don't know. from the Rockies standpoint, it's nice to keep your homegrown players. But like you said, I mean, it's hard to really get on the Rockies side when they do anything. They don't have a proven track record of doing anything right. So I don't know. I'm a little iffy on the move just because it's the Rockies. McMahon's a good player, and I think, like you said, he will take a step up. A bit of a late bloomer kind of player.
Mm-hmm.
Really good fielder. Hits for some power. Just needs to put it together a little bit more. And like you said, I mean, his numbers don't look as good because he played in Coors, but that's Coors. Everyone will use it as a detractor no matter what, if you do good, if you do bad. So I don't know. Iffy on it because of the Rockies, but should be good. But Rockies, we'll see.
It also just happened like right before we were doing the podcast, so not much time to take it in and think about it much.
Right. That just leaves a couple of the bigger names, I guess, on in free agency. We'll talk about a little bit very briefly. Outfielders Michael Conforto and Tommy Pham are probably the two best hitters left in free agency. And then there's a couple interesting pitchers that you have listed here, and it's Brett Anderson, Chris Archer, and Johnny Cueto, who are all kind of bounce back guys, inning eaters. The pitching market this year was incredibly thin outside of like Kershaw and Rodon.
It just went really fast too.
It did too. From this list, I obviously think Conforto is the big get, but I was trying to think about it before the show, and it's like, well, where does he go? I'm pretty sure the Mets extended a qualifying offer to him, so whoever gets him is going to forfeit a draft pick.
Mm-hmm.
What team is really going to sign him right now? They need left-handed power in the outfield. Most of the big contenders have that. I don't really get where he lands is the point now. And I think he hired Boris before free agency, almost directly before he hit free agency this year.
Mm-hmm.
And now he looks kind of stupid because he's still around. And no one's picked him up. And it's like, well, Boris told me I'd get all this money, and now like no team wants to offer me anything. And it kind of looks like he's just going to slip through the cracks and sign somewhere for a real paltry, kind of almost like a prove it deal that Marcus Semien had to sign.
Yeah, I could see him signing with like one of the non-competitive teams just to let him like build his value a little bit. Maybe go to Colorado and hit some dingers, like you were saying about Bryant, like increasing his Hall of Fame case, just like increasing his free agent value again. But yeah, I definitely could see him going for like a 1-year deal somewhere. I can't really think of anything off the top of my head of any team that is in need of any sort of left-handed hitting outfielders. But I think the A's could obviously be a fit considering everybody's left town, maybe even the Reds since they traded away Winker and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's going to be a team out there, but we've seen in the past, like the qualifying offer goes away once the next MLB draft comes up. Like you can't give up draft pick compensation for a draft that has already happened. So there is a possibility that Conforto lasts all the way until then. And, then a team jumps on him, but yeah, I don't know. I have no idea where he's going to go. But he is a bounce back candidate. I'm pretty sure he's guaranteed to sign like a 1-year deal.
Yeah, I think so too. One of the only teams that really came to mind instantly that like I kind of thought like, oh yeah, that makes sense, was be like the Padres.
Mm-hmm.
And that'd just be because they could really use some left-handed hitting in the outfield.
Mm-hmm.
But to do that, I would think they'd have to move Will Myers. And to move Will Myers, they'll probably have to package a prospect and send him somewhere in salary dump. So like, does Preller really want to eat a prospect, salary dump Will Myers somewhere, lose a draft pick, and sign Michael Conforto, who you have to bet on bouncing back? Like, I don't know. I don't know where he lands. Another one that I'm a bit higher on was Tommy Pham. He's obviously older now. Has kind of struggled in the last couple of years, and I actually think he makes a lot of sense for several contending teams as part of a platoon.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically, I think one of his big landing spots would be the Red Sox. I think he makes so much sense for the Red Sox because there's a lot of talk now of putting Verdugo in center and moving Jackie Bradley Jr. to right field. And you could platoon him with Jackie Bradley Jr.
For sure.
I think that makes a lot of sense for the Red Sox. And I think he'll go before Conforto does.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've always liked Tommy Pham. I didn't really put any thought into where he could end up. But yeah, there's really not too many free agents right now. So if anybody wants to make an impact move without having to give up prospects or like trading for anybody or signing Conforto like that, Tommy Pham is the way to go. I heard earlier in the offseason that he said he was open to playing some first base too. So if anybody's interested in that, that could be a possibility. I don't know. Tommy Pham seems like an ace type of guy. Like I already said, Conforto to the A's. That doesn't really make sense considering they're rebuilding. They don't want to give up any draft picks. So Tommy Pham seems like an ace type of guy where he's got that discipline and stuff. He can play all over the outfield. He started off really slow last year, but he's been really good since he got his eyes fixed. I know he was struggling with the Cardinals when he was first coming up there.
He had vertigo, didn't he? Or some sort of something wrong with his eyes that really hindered him hitting.
I think he got LASIK or something so that he could actually see the ball, and then he really broke out. But he's got like power, speed, plate discipline. I think I don't know, a lot of teams could use Tommy Pham.
I think so too. I think he represents like just a ton of like I've said value so many times. I think he's just a really good bargain buy right now. You could use him as a fourth outfielder. You could use him as part of a platoon. If you absolutely needed to and your team is bad, you could just have him your full-time DH. I think he's one of the biggest bargains left on the market. And then we'll talk about the trio of free agent pitchers, Brad Anderson, Chris Archer, and Johnny Cueto. They're all kind of cut from the same cloth. Starting pitching is just the well's drying up. So this is what you got. If you're going to get
they were just the top 3 projected WAR guys that were left on the market.
Right. And from these 3, I think I would like Johnny Cueto the most for any team that's really looking for an innings eater. I mean, he's durable for the most part, you know. At least he's remotely entertaining with all the shimmies. I don't know. Starting pitching right now is so barren. That you're not really going to get anything more than like a 5th starter now.
Yeah. I think I like Cueto. Obviously, he was on the Giants, but he struggled with a lot of injuries recently and ineffectiveness. I sort of like Chris Archer. I think he was obviously like a really coveted trade chip. He was obviously part of maybe the
trade baseball history
of all time. But yeah, so maybe the Pirates will give it another try with him just to maybe save face a little. But I think if a team brings him in, like if the Giants brought him in, I would really be interested. Like he seems like a guy that should have more upside, but I think he's lost a lot of velo on his fastball over the years. Obviously doesn't have the same stuff he had in his early 20s, but he could be pretty interesting with a team if they really have a plan for him. Maybe he should go into the bullpen or something, but considering there's so few starters out there, I think teams are going to want to keep him in the rotation if they do sign him.
I think you're right. I think that's all the free agency rundown we have to talk about today. Basically every big name free agent apart from Conforto and Pham are gone. So not a whole lot more to cover. So I think it's perfect time to bring in the closer.
Oh yeah, I think so too. We need to shut down this podcast after a good 2 hours. Longest podcast of all time. Let's go. World record for free baseball. Let's go. All right. Yeah. So today to bring in the closer to shut down this extra inning free baseball podcast, we've got Brad Ziegler, the unicorn known for his submarine delivery that defined his career, his 11-year career from 2008 to 2018. Started out with the A's, went to the D-backs where he had his best years, then finished out with the Red Sox and the Marlins. He was drafted in 2002 by the A's and 2003 by the Phillies, but ended up being DFA'd, but was scooped up again by the A's a few years later from indie ball, where he was having some success there, and they helped him to push his delivery southward towards a submarine delivery that helped him become really effective because it's such a funky delivery. There's so few guys that pitch from that angle, and that helped him get a lot of ground balls. He wasn't a big strikeout guy, wasn't a closer throughout his whole career. He finished 149th all time in saves, which is pretty solid, but it's not a ton. But he was a really fun guy to watch, just like super funky delivery. Go look him up on YouTube if you want to see what I'm talking about. But he peaked in 2015 with the D-backs, where he pitched in 66 games and had a 1.85 ERA that came out to a 223 ERA plus, which is 123% better than league average. Amazing. 0.96 whip, and that came with, I think, career high 30 saves for him. But for his career, he finished with a 13.1 baseball reference WAR in 717 innings pitched with 479 strikeouts. And that was 105 saves, which, like I mentioned, 149th all time. And a 2.75 ERA and a 1.26 whip. To have a sub-3 ERA for your career is really special, especially for a guy that started his career so late. He debuted at age 28, finished 8th in Rookie of the Year voting, but he just had that funky delivery that really defined him and made him one of the most memorable relief pitchers of the last decade, I think. Definitely one of those remembering some guys type of guy. But he's here to shut down this game, send this podcast home, send all the fans and our viewers home happy.
Yes, sir. And that is the 7th episode of Free Baseball, our Super Extra Innings podcast, free agency rundown. And join us next week where we'll have more things to discuss. Hopefully season preview for several divisions, maybe a couple teams. Spring training roundup, maybe a couple more trades. We'll see. I think that's all we've got for today. So make sure you join us next time. Follow us on our socials at DVS Bird. That's me. Jake Crumpler is obviously Jake Crumpler. And our third co-host, who unfortunately couldn't make it again today, is Isaiah at Isaiah2896. Read all of our articles at theathleteshub.com. It's presented by theathleteshub.org. And we'll see you next time.
All right.